I heard recording in progress.
Yes.
So I can officially welcome everybody to the beginning of the 11th year of Northwest Indiana Green Drinks. So everybody, this would not have been possible without the people who have been in coordinating roles over the years, and all of you as attendees. That's why we keep doing it, of course. Let me see. I want to thank our ongoing sponsors, and that would be Northwest Indiana Green Drinks, Save the Dunes, and the Michigan City Sustainability Commission. And tonight's hosts are, let me see. I have not said these numbers for a while. 95, whoops. Well, my printout didn't work too well tonight. I'm missing information here. It didn't print out one page. So anyhow, it's WIMS radio, AM and FM, serving our area from Chicago all the way up to Berrien County in Michigan. And also Save the Dunes is a host this evening too, because of Betsy Mayer, our executive director, being the presenter. So, heartfelt thanks to all of our sponsors and our hosts every month who make this possible. Let me see. Also, I wanted to mention that we do have our speaker lined up for February, and I'm going to announce it now because I have a tendency to forget at the end of our program. Amanda Shepard from Sierra Club Hoosier chapter will be with us. She'll be doing a presentation that I call it Advocacy 101, but she gives it a really snappy, snazzy title every time she's back. So I'll have the snappy, snazzy title when I post the announcement for the event. And that will be the first Thursday in February, 6:30 via Zoom and Facebook Live, as always. She'll be getting us ready for the legislative session in Indianapolis, so we're able to be effective advocates for good bills and against the bad ones. So that's it. Dylan, I hope I haven't forgotten anything, but I'm going to hand it over to you for housekeeping items.
Awesome. Thank you, Nancy. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. Just a couple of quick things. Everyone is now unable to unmute themselves. We welcome questions and would love to answer them for you if we have time at the end. This meeting is being recorded, and that recording will live on our Facebook page as well as our YouTube. So feel free to spread it around. And I think that is about it for right now. I'll pass it back to Nancy.
Thank you so very much, Dylan. Okay, so I am very excited because our kickoff every year in January, we almost always have had somebody from Save the Dunes. And our first ever Northwest Indiana Green Drinks, we had a presentation on Enbridge and the pipeline that was coming through Northwest Indiana at that point in time. And we had, oh my gosh, we had like well over 60, almost 70 people that we were cramming into a small room at Shoreline Brewery. And it was very exciting that we had so many people. We made the front page of the local News Dispatch 2 times with that particular program, and we were picked up by several other local newspapers. So I'll just have to give a shout out to the press because I believe we've been so successful because of the traditional print media, which helped us launch and become what we are today. I am very excited that Executive Director Betsy Mayer said yes to our invitation to be our presenter. And as of today, I'm going to have to stop calling her our new executive director because this month of January actually marks Betsy's 1-year anniversary as executive director for Save the Dunes. So I want to give her, a round of applause. I think she's been doing an outstanding job. And, I'm not going to waste a lot of time going into her background. She can tell you what she'd like you to know about her. I really like to give as much time as possible to our presenter. So Betsy, it's all yours. You're muted. You'll want to unmute, and then Dylan.
Okay, I think that it's in my bulk part now, so hopefully everybody can hear me. If not, let me know, give me a holler. But thank you so much, Nancy, for inviting me to present today. We are such proud sponsors of Northwest Indiana Green Drinks, and we really appreciate the opportunity that we have each January to share the important work that Save the Dunes is doing. So thank you so much. And I will just give you a little bit of my background before I start the presentation. So I have an environmental nonprofit background. So that's sort of my dream was to one day become the head of a nonprofit with an environmental mission. So this past year has been a complete dream come true for me. So I built a career around sort of hopping around, intentionally getting experience in a lot of different areas of nonprofit management at several different environmental nonprofits. So I was in Chicago, I worked for the Peggy Notabart Nature Museum. I worked for Lincoln Park Zoo for the last 12 years. So I have my master's in public administration. And so all of those are sort of the credential part, but I would say the piece that makes my work so fulfilling is the mission of Save the Dunes and how in alignment that is with the things I'm most passionate about. So I grew up visiting and spending time on Lake Michigan. So I'm one of those people that just loves Lake Michigan and wild places, spent a lot of time in nature as a child. And I'm assuming people can relate on this call if you're interested in topics like this. And as I got older, I got more interested in experiencing wilder places. And so me and my family today spend a lot of time visiting the national parks. We just did a road trip out to Acadia National Park out in Maine this past year, and we're slowly making our way around the whole country. But the place that, brings my love of Lake Michigan and our Indiana dunes and our national parks together is right here, and the work that I get to do protecting it. So it's been really exciting and very productive or successful year. And I'm really, really thrilled to be able to share with you a little bit more about what excites me about the work that Save the Dunes is doing and what makes the dunes special. So let's see if I can share my screen. Okay, so here we go. I admit I packed a lot into this presentation, so I will try to go through it rather quickly. There's probably an hour's worth of stuff, so if I'm talking quickly, that's why. And I want to get it all in because it's all really great. So the title, 70 years later, still leading the movement, you're going to get a taste of what that means. We did celebrate our 70th anniversary this past year, and there's still a lot of work that we're doing to save the dunes. So here's what we're going to cover. I want to first share a little bit about the Indiana dunes and what makes them special. And then I want to get into what Save the Dunes mission is and a little bit of our history. Then I'm going to show you a lot of really cool maps that will explain our regional area of focus and some of the things that make this area unique. And then I'll get a little bit more into how Save the Dunes is structured, our staff and board, and how members support us, how we get our funding to do the work that we do. And I'll finish up by sharing our 3 program areas, which we have 2 program staff on this call today. So you're more than welcome to chime in if you guys have anything you want to add, particularly at that point. So about the dunes. So our Indiana dunes were formed by the wind that's coming off of Lake Michigan, essentially. And Lake Michigan was formed by a glacier that's 14,000 years old. So we have some really cool things that I'll show you on the next slide about dune succession that's related to that whole process, but they've been being created for a very, very long time. And in that time, they have always been constantly changing and moving. So people who have been visiting the dunes their whole life, probably each time they come, it looks a little bit different, which is something special about this place. Some of the Indiana dunes that you find in the state and national park can be 100 to 200 feet tall. And some of the tallest dunes that we have are located within the state park itself. The national park has had 4 expansions over time and currently encompasses about 15,000 acres of protected land, which is a really remarkable thing. And we have 15 miles of protected shoreline in Indiana. And that is all part of a national park. There are 50 hiking trails. I am on a mission to get to all 50 of them. It's really fun exploring all the different types of paths that there are. And something that I'll cover a little bit in the history is that it's only a short hop, short car ride, 45 minutes to Chicago. It's soon going to be about an hour train ride instead of an hour and a half with the double track that they're building. So those are some of the things that make the dunes unique, in that it's an urban national park that is surrounded by Gary and Chicago and has a lot of foot traffic because of those things. So Indiana can be called the crossroads of America. I like to call it the crossroads of American habitat. Within the Indiana dunes itself, you can find several different ecosystems. So I've got them listed here. Obviously, you've got the shoreline and the dunes, but we also see wetlands and rivers and prairies, and then oak or forest or savanna environment, all within this area. So that's something that's really unique and special about the Indiana dunes specifically. It is also the birthplace of ecology. So for those of you who are familiar with our history, Henry Chandler Coles, who was a scientist from UChicago, did a lot of studying of plant succession and came up with that concept. And dune succession had several papers that he published on the topic, and that is how we got the reputation of being the birthplace. And because of everything changing all the time, that is why it's such a unique place, and a place that you could study plant ecology and plant succession, because the things are coming in, they're being born, they're dying, and then new things are coming in their place, basically in the order that you see of those different ecosystems. So you have that happening on the shoreline. You have that also happening as you travel inland. There's different dune, basically established past shorelines from as the glaciers receded. So there's so many amazing things that you can learn. I'm just scratching the surface here, and I highly encourage you to go on some ranger-led hikes where they're really committed to sharing some of the plant succession and dune succession stories and helping to explain that. And you can see some of this stuff firsthand. So it is because of all these things, the Indiana Dunes National Park is the 4th most biologically diverse national park. And we also have some pretty globally rare ecosystems right here. So dune and swale is this really unique ecosystem where you get the dune, and then it dips down into sort of a water wetland environment, and then you get another dune ridge, and it creates this corduroy sort of pattern. And you don't find that kind of environment everywhere in the globe. So this is a place where we have that, and we're very, especially passionate about protecting unique ecosystems like dune and swale. So that's another thing that makes Indiana Dunes really special. Another thing that you may or may not know is that this is a really big feeding ground and resting area for migrating birds. So this is considered like a stopover for a lot of migrating birds who are either coming or going across Lake Michigan. So this is like a good place for them to gather up their strength before they have to make the big journey across the lake. And we're right on a big migratory path as well. And then because of all those ecosystems that we have, each of those attracts different types of birds. And so you've got shoreline birds, you've got wetland birds, you've got birds that you find in forests or savannas. So that is one of the reasons why you can find so many different birds here. And we have quite a big birding population, or, birding enthusiast population that comes to the dunes every year. We've got the famous birding fest and whatnot. And then here's a couple surprising finds. Because of the way my screen is set up, I can't see it, but I would love for some folks to participate on this slide. So the first slide that I have on the left here is a tree graveyard. So because the sand is moving all the time, what can happen is things get covered and then uncovered. And so here you can see the tree graveyards that can appear because of that sand moving all the time. And I'm curious if anybody can tell me where they think this picture was taken. Feel free to drop it in the chat.
Someone said Mount Baldy. We got Mount Baldy, Coles Bog. Any other guesses? Mount Baldy.
Yeah.
Mount Baldy.
Most of you got it right. So this is the back. I don't know who took this. I might have taken this picture, but this is the back of Mount Baldy. I can kind of tell because of the steep slope of the fine sand that kind of blows over to that end of the dune. And so Mount Baldy is an example of a dune that has been moving for 5 to 10 feet, I believe it is, every year. It really doesn't take that much wind to move sand. I think it's anything over 7 miles an hour can start to move some sand. So if you think about how strong of storms we get in the winter, and how really strong those winds can be, you get a lot of sand movement. And I'm not saying it's just winter storms that's moving Mount Baldy, but it's just a way to explain that, like, you can see this dune moving. If you go there, you can see that this has moved back and moved inland quite a bit. And this is an example of how those tree graveyards can appear. So then on the right, I am curious if anybody knows, there's quite a few plant species, again, because of all the different ecosystems that we have coming together. So can anybody identify either of these species?
So James S. identified the picture plant. We got picture plant, prickly pear cactus. Oh, you guys are on it.
You guys are so on it. I'm preaching to the choir. So you got it. So the top one is the prickly pear cactus. So you wouldn't think that you would find cactus here in Indiana, but the sandy shores make a really great environment for that. And then the purple pitcher's plant, which is the one on the bottom, is a carnivorous plant that, so if you think of like a Venus flytrap, so those can be unique as well. And so those you can find in areas like Pinhook Bog, so the wetland areas. So those are just some of the things that make the Indiana Dunes pretty unique. So I encourage you, hopefully you've already got the bug and you're like, oh, I got to get out into the dunes and go find some of these special things. So now that you know why the dunes are so special, I want to share with you a little bit about Save the Dunes and our mission to save the dunes. So as you can see, our mission statement is to protect and advocate for the Indiana Dunes, but also Lake Michigan and the surrounding natural areas. And we're doing this essentially for the community of Northwest Indiana. And it's we're really rooted as an environmental organization, an environmental advocacy organization. That's how we started. But as we've continued to grow over the past 70 years, you'll see that we have expanded into direct conservation work and community engagement work as well. So it all started with this woman right here. Dorothy Buell is our founder. And she still, I feel like, has a presence today. She really can be attributed to the creation of the national park and building the movement that protected the lands that we have today. And at the time that this fight, if you want to describe it, for the dunes started, there was so much development. There wasn't as much regulation, so a lot of things could move rapidly without checks and balances. So it really did require a special person to step up and be able to express what makes the dunes so special and why they're worth saving. So we have a lot to thank Dorothy for. So let me just walk you through a little bit of the history of how we kind of established the national park and kind of got how it all began, essentially. So before there was any sort of fight to save the dunes or movement to save the dunes, the earliest sort of advocates or enthusiasts of the dunes were the Prairie Club. And that was a group that was coming to from Chicago, that was coming to recreate in the dunes and just spend some time together. And I just love these pictures. It just shows you how long ago this was that people were understanding and valuing this area for its recreational and opportunities and just sheer beauty. So as we moved through, sort of about 100, I can't see my notes actually, so I'm doing this all from my mind, but as you see the Hoosier slide in sort of this phase come in of starting to use the land for not just recreational use, but what can we get out of the environment? What can we sell sand? Can we build on this lakeshore and use its natural resources to create things? So you had this industrial movement happening nationally, and it was certainly happening here in Indiana. And so one of the early sad moments for those of us who want the dunes to be here and protected was when the Hoosier slide was mined. So John's Ball Glass, I don't know if it was John, sorry. They could create this unique hue. And if you saw those pictures from Mount Baldy, it's very similar. That type of sand is what, like, it's very fine, it's very uniform. That is what created this unique hue. And so it was mined to the ground, because our dunes are 100% sand. They're not built on hills or anything like that. So it was completely leveled. And so this is sort of the beginning of, okay, does there need to be a movement to protect the dunes? And then we started to see industry moving in, and there was the creation of the City of Gary and U.S. Gary Works for steel working. And so a lot of dunes were starting to be leveled to make way for industry. So there started to be some movement at this point to save the dunes and to keep it from being developed. And there was this really famous dunes pageant that was held, and it was sort of a national effort to bring attention to the dunes. And there's some really beautiful pictures. I highly encourage you to visit our website, where we have a brand new page dedicated to the history of Save the Dunes. And this is just, again, scratching the surface of some of the unique history that you can learn about on that page, and link to find out more about these stories. So there was some success after this push, and the state park was established. And so that was a huge win, obviously, for the environment. And that is where some of the tallest dunes in the Indiana Dunes are. So 192 feet, I think, is Mount Tom. And there's several other really tall dunes up there. So I highly encourage you to visit the state park, not just the national park, even though we love both. Because this is where you can see some of the first things that were created. And this is why we have a state park and a national park, is because this was established first. So as we keep moving, this was just a certain part of the dunes that was protected, and we continued to see industrial development on some of the other dunes. And so a movement started again, and this is when Save the Dunes entered the arena. And so you can see Dorothy Buell is pictured here with several other important people, and you can start to see the picket signs showing up. And this really, as I said, started as an environmental advocacy organization. And so we then saw Dorothy. She was basically on the phone all the time, calling people, expressing her passion for the dunes and why they should be saved. And they grew their membership base to, I think it was close to 1,000 people at one point, and really did have some national support for this effort. But there wasn't a ton of state support from the state of Indiana. And Dorothy was running into some challenges with getting anywhere with that. And so she looked specifically for federal support for a national park. That seemed like the best place to get the dune, get the permanent protections the dunes needed to not be developed. And she started to reach out to the senator in Illinois, Paul Douglas, who had this really great saying. I'm not going to say it perfectly, but said, I started my career wanting to save the world. Then I just wanted to in my mid-years, I wanted to save the country. And then in my twilight years or something like that, I just wanted to save the dunes. And so he was such an incredible ally. And something I love to point out about their partnership is that Dorothy was a Republican and Paul Douglas was a Democrat. And they were able to put their political feelings aside. Think about that in today's day and age, to move things forward. And I do think that sentiment certainly lives today with Save the Dunes, and how we want to work across the aisle in all of our advocacy efforts to find ways to keep our environment protected. So that is that partnership, and it was a very successful partnership because it did lead to the establishment of the National Lakeshore. And so that happened, and it was this huge win, right? This was what the whole thing started as. And there were, throughout this time sort of leading up to it, Save the Dunes did acquire some land and, did some other things to protect the dunes. But at that point, once the park was established, Save the Dunes' role really, because the land, or a lot of it, certainly not all of it, but a lot of it was now under state or federal protection, the role shifted from to supporting the national and state park. And that is something that we still do to this day quite a bit, is working directly with our partners at the national and the state park on conservation work and doing advocacy work for those institutions, or the desires of those institutions, if they want to, see more funds or things for their parks to do the conservation work they do. That's something that we can go and help support and advocate for. So sometimes people wonder, well, is this when the dunes became saved? But here we are 70 years later, still doing this work. And that is because the threats really continued. And it wasn't just this rosy, okay, we have a national park. The park was actually established as a compromise when the Port of Indiana was also built. So there was environmentalists saying save the dunes, and there were, business people advocating for a Port of Indiana, which is Burns Harbor, for those who don't know. And the compromise, it's called the Kennedy Compromise, was creating the Port of Indiana and establishing the national park. So we built a port at the same time as protecting all the land around it. And so you can imagine that created some new problems that needed to be addressed. And so there was industrial pollution that came with that, especially at the beginning when there was a lot of, unchecked regulation, and there weren't as many regulatory bodies doing, work. There was obviously habitat destruction that happened. And then just with any sort of, increased use of a land, you're going to start to see invasive species coming in, and then all the problems that come with that and how to manage that and the effects of the environment from that. More recently, we are also seeing climate change challenges. Shoreline erosion has been a really big problem the last few years. I'm sure many of you know that. And so there's those challenges as well. So the things have gotten better, certainly over time. It's slowly getting better, but this picture you can see here is an example of pollution that's happening straight out of Port Indiana directly into Lake Michigan. I wish I could say this was a picture from like the 60s or 70s, but I think this one was taken like in, the last 5 years. So there's still problems that can come up, and we're still, working really hard to figure out how do we create coexistence for these things? How do we have this beautiful national park and this heavy industrial area that is Northwest Indiana coexist together in a healthy and thriving way? And then most recently in 2019, we established the National Lakeshore became a national park. And that was a huge, again, win for environmentalists and for Northwest Indiana in general. The park is the #1 most visited place in Indiana. It's the biggest tourist destination. And it's with that, and with the status of the national park name instead of just the lakeshore, we're starting to see recreational stresses from those things. So you're seeing additional pathway erosion, more litter, those things are affecting the wildlife in the area. So there's a lot of work to do all the time. So that's what we're about. These are the things that we kind of focus on today. Okay, so regional area focus. I just wanted to mention briefly, and let me just check on time. So we are headquartered in Michigan City, which is in LaPorte County. And before I show you all the beautiful maps, I wanted to just point out that we have the privilege of working out of this beautiful historic home called the Barker House. It has this history of being an environmental hub in Northwest Indiana, and the Nature Conservancy and Shirley Hines Lands Trust have worked out of there. We've housed the Urban Waters Ambassador out of this building. So it's a really special place to us. And so this is where we are. And we have the privilege of maintaining this home and the dance hall and carriage house and other cool things that are on the property. And it's nestled inside of the Barker Woods Nature Preserve. And so now on this map, you can see this is where we are. This is the Barker House I just showed you. And our regional area focus is LaPorte County, Porter County, and Lake County. Can you guys see my cursor? Okay. So it's a big region, and we, keep our area focus to the dune habitat and Lake Michigan watershed, and I'll show you some other pictures here that describe those things. So This is a picture of the current national park map. And you can see all of the green area is the area that's now protected. So we had the establishment of the National Lakeshore. There were 4 subsequent expansion bills for land and national park status. And this is what is protected today. And it's really special. And you can see this is the state park. So this is what was going to be if it weren't for Save the Dunes stepping in and advocating for further protection. The other thing I want to point out on this map is that it's an extremely fragmented environment. You can see this is that Port of Indiana that I mentioned was established at the same time. You've got several, this is Gary. And so this is that urban environment butting right up against the national park. That's what makes it an urban park. And then you've got all of these residential areas nestled in here as well. Ogden Dunes and Dune Acres and Beverly Shores and all of those. So it's quite fragmented, and that presents challenges, especially for pollinators and other animals that need to be able to move around in order to survive, plants and animals. So this is why there are some challenges with that. This is a map that explains what the Lake Michigan watershed is. So all of the blue area in the rivers that you see, this all dumps out into Lake Michigan. And this in Indiana, Northwest Indiana, Lake Michigan is the main freshwater drinking source for residents. So it's really, really important that we are doing everything that we can to keep our waterways clean and providing healthy environment to live and recreate in. So
really quick, I'm so sorry to interrupt you.
yes, no, go ahead.
So if you could go back to your slide showing the map.
Yes. Which one?
I believe this one. So we have a comment that says there are 4 non-contiguous parcels to near Gary, and then Pinhook Bog and the Rookery.
Oh, like sort of these outlier parts of the national parks that we're talking
Yeah,
about?
so we're requesting a little bit more information about those if you have any.
Yeah, all I know is that, they are unique ecosystems that deserved protection as well, but it's a perfect example of the additional fragmentation that you see. So I don't know which one of these is Pinhook Bog, but maybe somebody else knows off the top of their head, or let me go to this one. So here's Heron Rookery. So here's the Pinhook Bog. So this is where you'd see that purple pitcher plant. The Heron Rookery is really famous for some of the herons and where it gets its name. Hence, it used to be a big nesting spot for that. So those are the ones I can see on this map, but that's just the gist of it, is that they are part of the national park, but they are not adjacent. Good
Thank
question.
you for letting me interrupt.
Yes, no, glad I could answer it. Okay, so I will speed up here because I know I packed a lot in. That was the really fun stuff. And so I'll just move through a little bit more about what Save the Dunes is doing now. So we have a board of directors. We currently have 13 board members on our board. We have 5, will be 6 staff members on staff, a mixture of part-time and full-time. And we currently have about 300 members that support our work. And for anybody who is a member that is on this call today, let me pause and just say thank you so much for your support. We really, really, we couldn't do it without you, and we are representing you. That's sort of the origins of our organization, as you know. And we represent the interests of the community. And so that is through our members. Our members give us, they give us legal standing in court. So there are occasions where we have gone to court for protecting the dunes or keeping, business and civic leaders accountable. And it is the members that help us justify, like, this is the voice, this is the community that we represent. So if you're inspired, please consider becoming a member yourself. Also, thank you so much to our partners. I think in a few pages, we'll see our finances, which we are supported so much by our partners as well in the region. And we really couldn't do it without them. I saw some partners on this call as well. So thank you so much for our partners who really have become such incredible collaborative people to work with that are also looking for the best, outcomes for our shared community. So here's just a little bit more detail. I won't get into the specifics. You can just read into that. But we have several committee members out of the board of directors. Nancy, who's leading our call, is our board president. We're so grateful for her leadership. She has been such a pleasure to work with this year, and really, as you all know, is an incredible environmental advocate here in Michigan City and for Northwest Indiana. Very lucky to have you, Nancy. And then here's that staff breakdown. So again, a mixture of part-time and full-time staff, but we basically have, our program areas, which I'll show you in our section, in another section. And we were really excited to introduce both a community engagement coordinator role, Dylan, who's hosting today, and then Harshini, who's on the call as well, is our full-time advocacy coordinator. So that has really expanded our capacity to do more work in both of those areas, and has been critical to the success of this past year. So there's myself and also an office manager on the administrative side, and Katie leads all of our program areas. So I mentioned I did this slide already. I did it early, so I'm just going to skip over it. You know why members are so important for us. And then this is the finances. So we have, it's gone up a little bit, probably going to be closer to $400,000 annual operating budget for this coming year. And our sources of funding, we are mostly grant funded, and we receive, thankfully, quite a few federal grants, and we administer quite a few of those grants. I'll get into that on the program page, but we oftentimes play this role of receiving funding that we can then disperse to other partners who are doing the boots on the ground work, but we come up with sort of the cohesive vision with them and do the application and grant administration piece. And then members, I mentioned, and individual giving. So thank you to anybody who we just wrapped up year end. So anybody who made a contribution this past year, we thank you so much. Corporate partners, I already mentioned, thank you so much. They also provide critical support to our finances. And then we have some wonderful events that bring in a little bit of income this year. And we've already talked about the wonderful merchandise that we now have on our new online shop page. So those are some of the places the ways that you can support us financially. So last but not least, I want to get into our program areas and some of the work that we're doing today. So we have 3 program areas. The first one I want to talk about is landscape level conservation. So this is what I was mentioning about partnerships, and we recently just completed some conservation action plans, which are basically these cohesive landscape level plans that were developed in partnership and with all of our other conservation partners, nonprofit partners in the region, not just nonprofit partners, all of our partners. And so the actions that we then take to actually do those plans is the things that we apply for grants for, and then we will work with those partners to do the boots on the ground work. We play a pretty large facilitation role for looking at acquisitions and stewardship and funding opportunities with all of those partners as well. We also have our own properties, and we are still protecting environment in that way as well, and looking for ways that we can increase our stewardship on those properties. So the next program area is advocacy. You probably guessed the next 2. I've already sort of spelled it out for you, but advocacy is again, the roots of our organization is still probably the core piece of the work that we do. So we're ensuring accountability with business and civic leaders. We're responding when there are threats, all the threats I mentioned on that previous page. We also uphold the interest of the public trust. So for those of you that are not familiar with the public trust, that is the right for all Hoosiers to freely access the beaches. They are public. They cannot be privately owned or used. And occasionally there is a litigation that comes up. It's something that's sort of inevitable, that it comes up and that's threatened. And so we're leading the front there on making sure that the public trust, which got codified into law under my predecessor, Natalie Johnson. So that is something that we're also advocating for, and that membership does support our increased work for that. And then we're, like I mentioned before, we're constantly looking for ways to meet and advocate with local and congressional representatives for increased support for protection of the Indiana Dunes and Lake Michigan. So we participate every year in Great Lakes Awareness Day and head out to DC. We're looking at doing additional visits this year and definitely working with our local state representatives and meeting with them in office here. So lots to do in this area. And then the last area, I call it connecting people with nature. This is sort of Dylan's area of focus, is our community engagement work. And it's something that we're probably, it's the newest and most exciting, I would say, of the work that we're doing. And she's been doing a phenomenal job of deepening our work in communities with Lake County specifically, and just bringing back in-person events for us, doing more tabling events and cleanup events. So it's really been a fantastic way to engage with the community. I hope that you guys consider participating in some of those this coming year. So we look to increase we've worked with public access improvement. We did some work with Michigan City, and we're currently working with the town of Beverly Shores on some public access work there. We educate people on how they can protect the natural areas just with their own choices, including choices you can make in your backyard. So our award-winning pollinator guide, which was made by our former staff member, Victoria Wittig, who is on this call today, is such a fantastic resource that we can bring to the community. And those are the types of resources we love to engage with the community about and show them the simple decisions they can make. And that guide is even something that we're looking to build our own pollinator garden at the Barker House this coming year. So we've cleared the way this past year. We had a volunteer cleanup and we were able to clear out a spot for it. So we're definitely not just talking the talk, but trying to walk the walk ourselves. And we try to promote opportunities to recreate. So providing hike opportunities, accessible opportunities for that. Those are the many ways that we do our community engagement work. So this is my last slide, is just if any of this sounded interesting to you or something you want to participate in, or if you're already participating in it and it sort of re-energized you, these are the many ways that you can be involved with Save the Dunes. I mentioned we do hikes. We're working on a conservation project to make the 11 plus miles of water trail on the east branch of the Little Calumet completely paddle the whole thing. And this past year we had a staff paddle and we were able to paddle 4 miles of it. So we're working with partners to clear the log jams there. So there's things like that, the hikes I mentioned, or just go yourself, go with a ranger. The community-led events that we have, the cleanup days, we're expecting to do many more of those this coming year. And then there's always our sort of staple events like our Monarch Fest and Dunes Dash, which are ways you can get involved. So if you aren't already, I encourage you to sign up for a monthly newsletter. You can just visit our website and sign up directly on the main page. And you can also follow us on social media. We have Instagram and Facebook accounts, which this group probably knows about since you're joining us via Facebook, but still want to make sure you're aware. And those are all places that you can hear about advocacy updates in ways that you personally can also advocate. You do not need to be a scientist. You do not need to be a plant expert. You just need to have passion for the dunes. And if you do, you can be an advocate, and we would love to show you the many, many ways that you can do that. So with that, I'd love to open it up for questions.
Awesome. So we have a few today for you. Let's see where to start. So Trent had a great question that I want to get to the original. Okay. How much did the flu pandemic of 1918 derail the original movement for the Indiana Sand Dunes National Park? Now, this has been a discussion throughout your presentation. And so originally, let's see. Yeah, so what is, we are wanting to know more about who was responsible for shifting. And please, I'm going to allow everyone to unmute themselves. So Trent, if I am butchering your question, feel free to unmute and ask it yourself right now. There may not be an answer.
Yeah,
okay.
and I will say I don't know about the flu pandemic specifically, and I wasn't following the chat. I'm admittedly not. I get distracted if I have to look at too many things when I'm giving a presentation. So I was focused on just my notes and the slides in front of me. But as I understand it, the derailment mostly came because of the World War. And now I'm blanking on if it was World War I or World War II. It's late, so forgive me. But Nancy, maybe you remember which one it is.
World War I.
Okay, thank you. That's what I thought, but I didn't want to speak out of turn. So that was the main reason why the movement lost some of its momentum. So it was a saying that was first save our country, then save the dunes. And so that's part of the reason why they backed off the national park plan. It was always a national park plan. It wasn't a national lakeshore plan. And they decided to look at least getting some protection through the state park.
Thank you for that. We have a hand raised, so you can go ahead, Faye.
Yes, I just wanted to know, thanks for the presentation. It was, but I wanted to know, are the schools in the various counties involved, and how are they involved?
You know, we do have a little bit involvement. I would love to have Nancy share some of the award that we gave to the middle schoolers this past year, which we're really excited for. They qualified for our Dorothy Buell Award, and so maybe we could start there if that's okay, Nancy.
Sure, I'd be happy to. One of the things that when I first came onto the board with Save the Dunes, we very carefully assessed what organizations were doing what with what groups of individuals. And Save the Dunes had been involved with educational efforts with children in the schools. But what we discovered is that was an overlap with the Dunes Learning Center. And since they were the experts in that particular area, we stepped back and allowed them to continue with what their main mission was. Also, they have a program that's called the Little Acorns, and I do believe they have presence in Lake Porter and LaPorte County with that particular program. The other thing that I'll have to say about youth involvement is that we did establish the Dorothy Buell Environmental Award 3 years ago, or maybe even 4. I think we've had 4 awardees so far. And this past year, Faye, I don't know, you may know or not, that Barker and Krieger Middle Schools in Michigan City were recognized for the efforts of Daisy Lee, who's the environmental and science teacher at Barker Middle School. The students actually put together their own project. They did research. it was driven by them that they decided they wanted to do something regarding recycling in Michigan City. And they put together a video, presented it to the superintendent of the Park and Recreation Department to have recycling bins placed in most of the parks in Michigan City. That's been a very successful program. The only two parks that don't have recycling is the Washington Park Beach and also Patriot Park, which is the ball diamond south of Michigan City. Now, we have people that are interested in actually putting together grants and raising monies to put a native fish species sculpture down at Washington Park Beach, and it's going to be an idea of feed the fish. And this particular fish is going to eat plastic bottles and aluminum cans. And this has been tried in Asia to help with pollution problem on beaches and has been extremely successful. So that's hopefully the next project that the youth in our community will be able to be involved with.
Thank you for that, Nancy.
Thank
We have another question. Jurades, am I saying that correctly?
I think so.
Would like to know more about the status of the new Dune property that we acquired in Long Beach.
Oh, yes, Stockwell Woods. Oh, we are so excited about Stockwell. So we have for a while now had a property called Stockwell Woods, which is adjacent to or in the town of Long Beach. And very recently, in the last year, we had additional parcels that were owned by the town of Long Beach donated to us so that they could be protected in perpetuity. So this property is now almost 40 acres of protected land that Save the Dunes owns. And so it is a really fantastic example of a shoreline community or community in general that is putting aside land and making sure that that is protected while there is also development in residential areas. And that's exactly what we want to see. We understand that we can't just protect everything and never develop, but you have to develop sustainably. And to put this land aside and make it this valuable resource for that community is so special. And it's open to anybody, but the parking is somewhat limited right now. So it's kind of hard to visit. We are working on, we're exploring some new parking opportunities so that we can hopefully promote it a little bit more to communities outside of Long Beach and they can visit it. But we had it assessed recently and it's actually in pretty good shape in terms of not too many invasive species, but we're doing some work right now. We're partnering with US Fish and Wildlife to do some tree thinning and work to restore some of the savanna areas. And it has some really tall dunes on the property as well. So it's definitely something worth visiting and something that we're really excited about.
Okay. If there are any other questions, I welcome you all to unmute.
Dylan, do we have any questions come through on Facebook Live?
On Facebook, Facebook is giving me a hard time and not allowing me to see all the comments. So
Oh, I'm sorry about that. Okay.
I do believe that someone brought up Briar East Dunes as a area that needs protecting. So do you have any information about that, Betsy, that you would like to share?
We're actively talking with some of the folks that are working on protecting that area right now and getting brought up to speed on it. And so I don't really have any additional information I can share on that, but I do know that they're doing a good job of keeping the pressure on and advocating that area remain protected and undeveloped.
Thank you for that. I believe there was one more question on Facebook. Let's see if I can pull it up on my phone and see it that way. Thank you all for bearing with me and being patient. Thank you all for bearing with me and being patient. Is there some effort to acquire some land to connect the fragmented areas to make the park more contiguous?
Yes and no. There's a lot, the national park even themselves will say that there's not a ton of land that isn't developed left along the perimeters where you could do more expansions. Having said that, we do own a property that we are hoping the boundary line can be adjusted that's directly adjacent to it. If I were to go back to that national park map, you would see it, it's more towards like Porter and Lake County side of the map. And so hopefully that will happen in the coming years. It's a very, long process to have federal, have protected land added to a national park, but we are working directly with the park on that and have been slowly making progress the last year or two.
Awesome. And we have 2 more questions. So is the former Inland Manor one of those disjointed parcels in Gary? Do you know?
I don't know so Inland Manor, if I'm remembering correctly, is a part of, it's technically, I couldn't say exactly what its protection is, but technically somebody has access to it and there are conversations happening to try to make that a restored property, but I don't know where they are exactly in those conversations. It's all I can tell you is it's not Save the Dunes.
And then this is an easier question to answer. How do we interact with Shirley Hines?
Oh, they are one of our closest partners. We love Shirley Hines. So we partner with them quite a bit on some of those volunteer days. The Barker Woods that surrounds our property where Barker House is owned by Shirley Hines. So we even have that close of a connection with them where we're working in partnership with them just right on our property. And, they're a wonderful organization that is doing a lot of great and similar work. And so we partner when it makes sense to partner, and we divide and conquer when it makes sense to divide and conquer. And I would say we're in interaction with them probably on a almost weekly basis. They're a very close partner of ours.
How do we interact with Friends of the Dunes?
Oh, we love them as well. They they're a partner of ours as well. We'll partner sometimes on fundraising opportunities. So they fundraise for the Dunes Learning Center, the state park, and the national park. And so sometimes there's crossover opportunities for us to do events. And so we'll do that too. Great questions.
Absolutely.
Yeah, one of the things I have absolutely loved about this past year and stepping into my role is the partnership work that we get to do. Northwest Indiana has a really amazing culture, and this was really founded by this Save the Dunes, model of partnering. We think of it as this newer thing, but Save the Dunes has been partnering since the beginning, and they created a really great blueprint for it, and that's certainly still alive and well today. So all of this work wouldn't be done if it weren't for all of our corporate partners, our park partners, our environmental partners. I was just on a call with the Environmental Law and Policy Center earlier today. This is how you make it all happen. So thank you to all of our partners.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we'll draw the question and answer period to a close at this point. know that you can always contact either Betsy or staff members at Save the Dunes, you know, if there are questions that haven't been answered yet. I know they're really great about answering their email. Also, I'm available too if it's something that I may know about. I always like to close the program with some more acknowledgements. These are going to be really brief ones, but I've noticed Doug Ross is on our call this evening, and Doug has written several articles about the dunes and about Lake Michigan. So I really want to give a shout out to him. You'll find his articles mostly in the Northwest Indiana Times. And he actually has a fan club subscription that you can become a member of, and you'll get an automatic email every time one of his articles has been published. So I think that's a great service that's available through the newspaper and also through him. Also, Dr. Gerard Landwehr, I want to acknowledge you for all the questions you're asking us. And I know we weren't able to get to all of those, but you're the one who kept an eye on the Indiana Dunes Visitor Center. And when they took down the Dorothy Buell Visitor Center sign, you were on that and kept on it until it got put back up. So I really want to acknowledge you for being sure that the founder of our organization continues to receive her just recognition for what she did. I'm totally convinced without her, we would not have had an Indiana Dunes National Lakeshore, and certainly we would have had an Indiana Dunes National Park. My last acknowledgement, which is probably the most important one of all, goes to Kathy Sipple. And without Kathy, we would not have a green drinks, period. She started the whole green drinks movement in Valparaiso. Expanded to Michigan City. We had a brief time in Gary, Indiana, and we all have come together and we consolidated so that we're working together as partners and bringing this program to a lot of people once every month, except for July and December when we take time off. So Kathy, let's everybody just give really Kathy a big round of applause, because none of this would have happened without her. I'm very clear on that also. So I just want to give you a reminder, the next time we'll be getting back together is on February 2nd, which is the first Thursday of the month, 6:30 p.m. Same place. If you like Zoom, join us here. We also, you can find us also on Facebook Live on the Save the Dunes page. Our presenter will be Amanda Shepard, who is the executive director of the Sierra Club Hoosier chapter, and she'll be talking about basically advocacy 101 to get us ready and up to speed so we're able to develop relationships with our state senator and our House representative. So that's a wrap for us tonight. Thank you all for joining us. I know we went a little bit longer than we usually do, but Betsy, this was extremely interesting. And I want to acknowledge you for doing this without being able to see your personal notes that went with each of the slides. Oh my gosh. I think we turned off something beforehand that we weren't supposed to turn off. We thought that there was the closed captioning going on, but none of us could see it. And only Betsy could see it, but I think she turned off her personal notes. So really just a big acknowledgement to you for getting through that whole presentation without your notes.
Thanks for recognizing that. I thought I needed them, but it turns out I didn't. So all good.
All's very good. Okay. Thank you, everybody. And, joyous new year. We're going to have a really great 2023 with the foundation work that was done by Betsy and our board of directors in 2022. We are ready to take off and fly this coming year. So thank you, everybody. Please become a member, continue to donate. Our members are a backbone. We couldn't do without you. So thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.